Welcome, Seth. How are you?
I'm so happy to be here. Like another round of our great project.
And you just returned from Italy, didn't you?
I did. It was so sunny and warm, and now I'm back in cold, rainy London.
Yeah. It's
It's dark. It's really dark.
yeah, London's weather has been a bit rubbish the last few days, but it's good to have you back.
Great to be here. Thanks so
Yeah.
much for for letting me be on because as you know I was flying yesterday, so I'm
Yeah.
really happy to be here, especially for this is a great data. Great data, a great topic.
Absolutely. So hopefully everyone can hear us well. I'm right by the microphone, so can't get any closer to that. So Seth, I'm going to move Zoom out of the way so we can focus on the data. It's great to see a lot of people on the chat. Everyone who's on the chat, please feel free to just put your questions in there. If we don't answer straight away, as I said, we've got Helen from Operation Fistula on the chat as well. So she's going to answer any questions that she sees coming up. And we're going to go through this review. And hopefully people know how this works. But for those who don't, this review is this live stream on YouTube that still flusters me a little bit because it's a bit of an unfamiliar beast. And we do this every week, and it's our way of giving feedback. And this week, thankfully, Seth is joining us to give his perspective on these visualizations. And I shared with him the list I collated ahead of time. And this week, the data set is about contraceptive use and access to contraception. And Seth, maybe a few words from you on this topic, if you can provide some background.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a great topic because it's a lot about rights. Having access to modern contraceptives, it empowers women. It frees them to have control over their bodies and agency over their fertility and their sexual health. And we know that in the poorest parts of the world, there's a lot of unmet need. I mean, we think there's around 218 million women that need modern contraception. And that unmet need is disproportionately high among the youngest. So 43% of that population, we think, is between 15 and 19 years old. A lot of that's because it's quite taboo in many cultures for girls that age to be sexually active, and that prevents a lot of women and girls from having access to things that can protect them. Now, the WHO says, and I quote, that providing access to all women in developing countries who currently have an unmet need for modern methods of contraception would prevent 79,000 maternal deaths. Oh, wow. And 1.1 million infant deaths. So the use of contraception actually does make motherhood a lot safer. And what we know is that there are about 20 maternal injuries for every maternal death. So that means that that we would have a much bigger number of fistula patients as a result of the lack of access to modern contraceptives. So we're really excited for this because it speaks to the broader issues of gender equality, or women having the right to protect themselves and access to those modern contraceptives. So we're really excited to see what the community's put together for this.
Absolutely. And I think most of us probably live in an environment where it's women access to contraception, but also as men, it's a no-brainer, right? We just take it for granted. So it's really good for us all to actually give some thought to this topic and consider what other people are going through and how much of an impact it has that they don't have what we basically see as a basic, right or convenience. So let's dive into this. As a quick reminder, I just want to point this out. So on data.world, that's where you will found the data, hopefully. There is also what we always publish for Viz 5 is a data dictionary and an overview about the topic, which is basically in lieu of having an article. And someone said zoom in. Okay, let me zoom in. Having an article that we use. So the team around Seth and Helen put this together for us, which is super helpful. Make sure you use it if you're in any way unsure about what the different fields are in the data set. And then, of course, the data set itself. Okay, so now we're going over to Twitter, and I've put together a collection. And this is a quick reminder. We're not going to manage to get through every viz because I think there was about 50 plus submissions this week and we just don't have enough time. But yes, big round of applause for that. So I basically took the full list and then I went through and looked at what types of vizzes that we have. We had a lot of scatter plots, we had a lot of maps, so I took some out, and that's not any judgment on the person who created it or the viz. It's just to say, let's look at as many different types of visualizations and see what we can comment on. And I think we're going to start from the bottom of the list, Seth. If we go all the way to the bottom, and I'm just checking, so I can see it's a bit small on the screen, but the list on Twitter isn't the most important thing. I'm going to zoom into the actual vizzes, and we'll start with Ashish Chopra and his visualization. So I'll go to Tableau Public and I'll make it as big as I can. And yeah, keep up the chat. Get to know each other in that YouTube live chat. Okay, let me see if I can zoom in. Oh, I made that quite big. Okay, so this one, as all of the ones to come, women's contraceptive needs. So Ashish starts with a bit of an introduction that there are millions of women with unmet needs for contraception. That's actually the first point where I want to take a quick stop and say, I've read a lot in a lot of the visualizations, this term unmet need, which, is perfectly technically clear and all. But I want to encourage everyone to think, is there another way to describe unmet need? Because I think it's just something that isn't as straightforward to understand for a broad audience. So what about something like don't have access to, or cannot access, or something like that? That's just more general, commonly used language. Not sure what your thoughts are on that, Seth.
Yeah, I as I look through the submissions, I think something about the way of framing it as a negative, it creates some confusion. And I did see some errors, just small errors, spelling errors, but also confusion of access versus unmet need. And it somehow, for some reason, it is confusing. And I think just talking about, what people want and what they have access to. And looking at what that access does, do people use it? There are some places where the need is, the unmet need is low, but the use is also low. So I think it's really, it is a little bit confusing and a little bit awkward, but I agree. Access to modern contraceptives is really what we're talking about.
Yeah. So I think it's good to provide a bit of introduction to the topic, because just like for most of us who created the vizzes, it's not a topic we're all super familiar with or that we've really talked about, even if we're familiar with it. So it's good to kind of get the audience thinking before diving into the data. And then we have this, big map. And I don't fully understand what the purpose is of the map, because it has a color legend, but it doesn't really have a call to action or a very clear title that says, hey, this is what the map shows. And you're more than welcome to use a map. I think they're nice and engaging, especially because we're talking about a specific type of country, the lower and middle income countries, but also considering, do you need the map? What value does it add? Now, if we dive properly into the viz further down, the percentage of women met versus unmet contraceptive needs. And again, that's that slightly awkward language where it just sounds quite technical and distant, whereas is there another way you could describe it? And Seth, what do you think? We've got a few of these scatter plots coming up. What do you think about them? Do you find them maybe just what do you think about them?
Yeah, I think they all, in the different vizzes that are here, they all have kind of different purposes. But in this case, in this specific one, I get a little bit caught up with the words because in the top, sort of highlight, Cuba has the highest percentage of women with met contraceptive needs. And then Trinidad and Tobago has the highest percentage of women with unmet needs. So I think, I don't know, this may be super picky, but I get very distracted by this. I think you should pick, if you're going to talk about met needs or unmet needs, and make the two comparisons consistent. Because when you kind of highlight these two different things, both are the highest and they're different sides of the plot. That just, to me, I think it's distracting. So I think if you're going to annotate it, I would try to keep the language consistent, even if it's that awkward language, to just keep it consistent. So the basis of comparison, you're comparing apples to apples, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can hover over these dots, but I find because there are so many dots that it's a bit difficult to see what do I as the audience, what am I supposed to do with this? Sure, I can hover over all of them, but there's a lot of countries in this data set. Can you cluster them somehow? Can you group them or color them by continent or something like that, just to make it a bit easier visually for us to comprehend how do these relate to each other? Let's scroll a bit further down. Okay, so that's it. So at the bottom, visualizing gender inequality, great to have that called out. Find out more at Operation Fistula. It's good that you have that call to action, but I think it could be more prominent, and maybe you can pick up one of the earlier colors that you had, the yellow or the blue, just to make that stand out. Even some sort of box around it, a click here, something like that would be great. Any other comments from you, Seth?
No.
Okay.
I think we probably got to move a little quick because there's so many.
Yes, absolutely. So let me move from that to the next one by Masato. Okay. So as I said, there's lots of different types of VISs that we've found. Contraceptive use worldwide. So that picks up the title from the original VIS that we provided. Now, the data source takes up the prime real estate. The top of the VIS, there's just the reference. So I would suggest move that data source to the bottom because, yes, ideally people go and check the report out, but what we want to have them do first is actually interact with your visualization and find out something. Seth, what was your first impression here?
I really like the colors. When I looked at this, my first impression was I like the mix of colors. My second is, why do we have the map in the upper corner? Because it feels like an afterthought and not really adding a lot of value. Yeah. But I think, and maybe it could be like, here's the countries that are included, but if you're going to do that, I don't think you need to have and this is again, I'm like in a picky mood, but I don't think you need the countries to have darker outlines in that map if you're going to make it so small. It just kind of gives you a sense of coverage. Also, I saw in mine, some of the colors aren't lining up between the upper, right underneath the names of the regions, where you have the numbers 28 and 6 and 25 and 30. Like the 6 highlight doesn't line up over the chart, and that makes me wonder why.
Yeah, there's also too many typos for me just in a single sentence. So this should be using, then the next one should be traditional, and method is spelled wrong. So if you have 3 typos in one sentence, it makes me, and please don't take this the wrong way, but it makes me question whether I should even continue reading and whether what I'm looking at is valid, because it's those small things that make a huge difference for people's perception.
Absolutely. There were the ones I looked at ahead of this. There was a fair amount of spelling mistakes. And guys, attention to detail as an analyst is like absolutely fundamental. So it doesn't, you don't get to pick and choose, right? And I am a terrible speller. Anyone who's seen me in front of a whiteboard knows that it is literally it's almost bordering on a disability. So I am I really try to check and double check and then have somebody read it. And I know, but when you're doing this, Eva's exactly right. It makes you question, what else has not been paid close attention to.
Now, one more point I want to make on the colors here. So the 2 grays in the color legend are almost the same, at least in this color legend. And also, if you're talking about contraceptive use, why would you include the ones who don't want to use contraceptives because they actually don't want to avoid pregnancy? I would just remove them because it removes complexity and it lets people focus on the women who want to use contraceptives but don't have access, or they use traditional methods, or they don't use any method but they still want to avoid pregnancy. I think those are the people we should focus on, not the ones who, are kind of, well, I want to get pregnant, I don't want to use contraceptives, because they're not the ones we're talking about here when it comes to accessing contraceptives. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. And this is from Kelly. And it's great to see so many additional people join. We've got 81 people right now watching live, which is great. I think that's partly thanks to the slightly later time, because on the East Coast it's lunchtime, so people can probably tune in. So first impression, Seth, on this viz about Africa.
I like the big picture, like just the way it looked. I like the color kind of look and feel of it. But I think the thing that I thought, and I may be like getting in a little bit of trouble here, but Trinidad and Tobago is in the Caribbean, though, right? It's not in Africa. And was my geography wrong?
No, that's what I thought too.
Yeah, because I think if you, in fact, actually, it is colored there. It says
it's
Latin
colored
America.
as Latin America, yeah.
So I think that's like, again, attention to detail kind of mistake, because it's like, I think visually it's kind of cool. I like how the map's used. I like the picture of it without kind of getting into the details of it. The first thing though that I saw is like, why is Trinidad and Tobago part of Africa?
Yeah.
And then I went to the bottom because of Togo. I looked at Togo because I really love Togo, and nobody knows anything about Togo. And it's an amazing place with a lot of really great orgs. One, I'll just give a shout out to Integrate Health, doing really phenomenal work in Togo. But yeah, so for me, I was again just desperately distracted by Trinidad and Tobago's like positioning in this into Africa.
One suggestion I would make is that the title, so Into Africa, okay, I see Africa on here, so that connects for me, but the smaller title is really clunky. Continent with the most number of countries where women face unmet needs and not using contraceptives. Like that's, I don't even know what that means. Maybe something like, well, Africa also has a lot of countries, but if you want to stick with that, continent with the largest number of countries where women struggle to access contraception, or where women who want to avoid pregnancy struggle to access contraception, something like that, where you make it clearer what the actual topic is, because they face unmet needs. What are these unmet needs? Because it doesn't seem connected to the contraceptives for me. It also seems a bit crowded. Everything is very close together. There isn't really space in the viz. And if you're talking about Africa, why would you bring in the other continents? Like, why not just leave them out and just focus on Africa? And then you have a bit more space for everything, and you could maybe even make the map a bit, it's very prominent, and I don't mind it, but I think it distracts. And if you just remove the color and make it just the outlines of the countries and not shaded, it's a bit more in the background, and the other stuff can pop more into the foreground.
Yeah, I mean, so even, one thing, like it is crowded, but I think crowded could work in this case, but it has to be about Africa, because you're like shoving Africa really in, and you've got the title with Africa and Africa there, but then there's all this nuance about these other regions, which it totally doesn't work. The crowdingness, it absolutely can't work if you start to bring, if you have some big message concentrated and you're hitting me with it hard and big, that could totally work. But I think it's very confusing. And when you read the text, you can see why Trinidad and Tobago are there. You do see it's not part of Africa, but the first thing, it just you think it's a thing about Africa because of Africa being so prominent, and then it's then your eye goes right to the next part of real estate, which is not.
Absolutely.
It's just, it seems a little confused in the story.
Yeah, and I think if people are struggling with how to describe this topic, maybe think of someone who hasn't looked at the data set yet. Maybe, this is my personal opinion, if you were trying to explain this data to a guy, because they're not thinking necessarily about contraception, maybe just think about how would you explain this to a lay person who hasn't looked at the data set, who's a guy who doesn't necessarily think about, what the impact is further down the track of a woman having an unwanted pregnancy, all of those things. Like, just plain English. You can use more sentences if it makes it clearer. I think I would prefer 5 sentences that are really descriptive over 2 that are convoluted and make me confused. Okay. We'll move on to the next one by Preet. Okay. And here we have contraceptive use across different countries. And this is again a map. And we have, we don't have a scatter plot. We have more like a dot plot further down. So let me zoom in a bit, and I just have to scroll through the viz. So about the viz, contraception is a way to prevent pregnancy. This visualization talks about the proportion of women that have met contraceptive needs or not using. I don't understand that.
This was one of the ones that I was confused about, because I think the wording was confused, like the unmet need thing.
Yeah, I think because it's not women meeting the need, it's whether women's needs have been met by the access they have, right? Is that how you would describe it?
Yes, that's right. The woman's needs are not met, right? It's not she hasn't met the needs, it's that her personal needs are not met.
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Eva.
I was just going to say it's good to include what modern methods are. I think that's helpful information, because some people might be like, well, what's a modern method and what's a traditional method? So I really like that explanation. The one on the left, I think, just needs a bit of wordsmithing to get it right and clear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I thought when I looked at the map is that the needs met, and this was again to the awkwardness of kind of the unmet needs. When you look at this, it's basically drawing your attention to countries that are meeting the needs relatively, right? Because you're not focusing on where the needs are not being met, you're focusing on where they are, because where they're not is kind of faded out. But I would think that, we're trying to kind of point out where they're not. So you might kind of use the inverse logic, make it lighter where the needs are being met and darker where they're not. I don't know. When I looked at that, I'm like, oh, look who's doing well, not look who's not getting it done,
Yeah, and I think it's okay if someone wants to focus on the positive story, but I think it would be more powerful if we had data over time where we could say they have come so far already because of they're doing X, Y, Z. We don't really have that data. This is a snapshot in time. So I think the more powerful story so far is about the unmet needs, because we want to raise awareness for that so that something happens and people get more involved. But let's have a look further down what else there is. So contraceptive needs in South Africa. Each dot represents a country. So I'm confused because South Africa is a country. Or is this Southern Africa? Or is this all of Africa? Because the map shows all of Africa.
Yeah, if you click one of the country dots, it changes it.
Okay, so it changes it.
Yeah.
Okay, in that case, I find I need to click on the dot further up. Let's have a look at Congo. Because in that case, I would suggest to just update the subtitle and say the selected country is highlighted, all other countries are represented in a smaller dot or something like that. Because that confused me for a moment. Now, someone suggests using colors for countries rather than dots would make a good impact, and I disagree, because if you have 50 different colors, that is just going to be a nightmare. So I will not follow that suggestion. I think it's fine to have the dots for context. The question is here, and I need to remind myself, so Preet, how do you want people to actually interact with your visualization and move through it? Because do you want them to just, explore what, let's say we want to explore what Egypt is doing. Are they expected to click through all of the different countries for information, or how do you want them to navigate? Maybe something to keep in mind. Any other comments from you? There's some key takeaways. What do you think of those, Seth?
I didn't get to it really. It's too great. No. I mean, when I look at the viz, I won't. I would never dig into it. It's not attractive enough to make you want to read it, right? I think maybe some color or some delineation of the font or the numbers on it or something to make it, a little bit more, enticing to read. I think would be important.
Yeah, and again, in the key takeaways, so number 2 is just wrong. South Africa and Botswana are the only countries where they don't use traditional methods for contraception. You can't tell that based on this data set, because I'm sure there are plenty of people doing that. They just maybe didn't respond to the survey. In point 3 and 7, there's no point 4. 3 talks about Cuba, which is not in Africa, and 7 talks about Trinidad and Tobago, which is not in Africa. Azerbaijan, I would think, would be classified as Asia. So I think those key takeaways need to be updated as well. I do think, though, that you can change the continent. But that's something that just takes a bit too much effort to figure out for someone who, maybe doesn't know how to interact with visors. So maybe just a bit of consideration about the user experience there. Okay, moving on to the next one, which I picked because the colors I found quite surprising. Oh, it's changed. Okay, it was different in the picture, but it's still pink. And actually, I don't know if I saw it, Seth, because you were still traveling, but a tweet I sent out a couple of days ago is that just because it's about women, it doesn't need to be pink. So, if people choose pink, that's fine, but just something to remember. It doesn't have to be a stereotypical woman's color. And with that, I'll let you talk for a bit, Seth, and let us know what you think.
Yeah, well, I love pink, I really do. But I do, absolutely. You don't have to assign these traditional colors, of what is sort of in at least in the United States, I know it is. Maybe even in Europe, that pink is for girls and blue is for boys. But I also think that in this case, the pink, the colors, and at least on my computer, the women, it's like part of it is a little more purpley. Some of the colors are not in the pink family. Like some of the way the font is, women's is not in the pink family. That's a purple. That's a shade of purple to me. And the coloring of the countries is definitely is definitely in the pink family. It feels more, but I don't know. With this one, I was I thought it was I didn't get too much into it because I did start to look at the met needs versus unmet needs, and this was when I looked at this one ahead of in prep. This was where I was also thinking about how awkward it is to unmet needs and met needs, because why is it not additive, right? Are they not together? Met needs and unmet needs are 100%. And so I started getting a little bogged down in that. But one thing I just want to say, is I feel like I'm not adding any really productive value in my comment right now, is that contraception is a male and a female issue. It's not just a female issue. So even if, when you put something as pink here, it does really load it on women. So because we do have that kind of bias in our heads. So I think just to remind everybody that this is an issue that affects everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you say that because, like you suggest, it's very easy to just put that on the woman because they're the ones who can get pregnant. But, there's definitely a bit of a shared responsibility there. Now, I want to come back to the viz and some of the design aspects. So first up is that you have a continuous scale of, the percentage of to what degree have the needs been met, or what percentage of women say their needs have been met. This shouldn't be two colors that are very similar, pink and purple, on opposite ends of the spectrum. It should be a single color from light to dark or from dark to light, because you would think that Africa is doing really well, but also China and parts of Asia are doing really well because they're all really intense colors. And what you want to highlight is, well, where's the need, or where have people done really well? So just a single color on that spectrum. Also, so I see this design element. I'm not sure it really works for me. Also, the not needed. Well, is it about contraceptive needs or about people who don't need it? Because if 50%, I'm not sure if that number is right, but if 50% say, well, I don't have any need for contraceptives, maybe we should remove them from the viz and adjust the focus accordingly. And then I see these kind of slightly awkward boxes near some of these pills that I don't know if they're hiding something, but I can see them and they shouldn't be there. So something to update. And then the font seems to change. So the header for the bar chart has a different font from the text, and then hover to see details also looks like a different font. Maybe similar but still different. So just something to tidy up a little bit. And making women's in the title purple suggests, okay, so, what happens in this country, this is about the women, but then there's also that pink. So I think it's not clear what the color actually means. And I think the metric of the percentage should be explained a bit more than it currently is.
Yeah, and I do think the shadow shade sort of thing is really is not helpful.
Yeah.
because also there's those two boxes that really you're wondering why are there boxes there, like so
yeah.
I think you just lose it. And maybe also back to the original thing when I was looking at this was like the met needs versus unmet needs. It is additive, right? When you put them all together, they do add up to 100%. So, but why not make them closer? Like why not kind of show the balance of met, unmet, and, not applicable, in a continuum. I think that's an important thing. And I would say that not just for this viz, for other viz as well. There's been several where, you see these two contrasting things and sort of the not applicable, which balances it out, is missing, and it makes you question like why does that not add up, right?
Yeah, and I think it's as simple as just saying the remainder to 100% are the people who don't have a need for contraception at this moment because they are actually trying to get pregnant, and that's probably as much as you need to say just to clarify where the number is from, but it doesn't need to be visualized as well, I guess is what we're trying to say. Okay. Let's jump to Jeremy Johnson. He's created this kind of stacked bar chart, but it looks a bit like, it always reminds me of those aerobics boxes, where you've got those little squares on the side and then you just stack kind of plates on top. But it's
plyometrics. Yeah.
Say again?
Plyometrics. Like jumping up on the bar. I love that. I used to back when I was in shape.
Oh, tell me about it. I'm just in a recovery period and it's not fun. Anyhow, so Jeremy is looking at contraceptive use worldwide, and I see a world map, but there's only one area or sub-region highlighted. So my first suggestion would be, if you suggest it's worldwide, or if you start with worldwide, maybe the whole world is ready, or maybe the title needs to change a bit because we are just looking at low and middle income countries. What do you think of the bar chart, Seth?
When I looked at it, I thought it reminded me of like an equalizer, in a like audio, like different things kind of going up and down as the music goes. And then I started looking at the colors. I kind of like it, but I do think I'm back to this like everything adds up to 100%, but then why are the stacks side by side? I don't find it hugely useful. I think it makes me start to ask questions that are not really oriented around the issue, but around the design elements. And I think whenever design has you questioning design, there's a problem with the design,
Yeah, I've just selected Melanesia, but maybe I'll select the bigger regions. So let's say Southeast Asia, because there's a few more countries. Now, I like that the map highlights, but maybe it could zoom in as well, so I can have more detail around the countries. And then on the right side, I've worked with this data, I've read through the documentation, but I still don't fully understand what's going on here. So it says contraceptive needs met percentage within each category. So it doesn't actually mention that this is responses by women. I would definitely include that. So percentage for each category is contraceptive needs met across the board. Now, what does not applicable mean? Because if that's the ones who are not trying to use contraceptives, again, I would get rid of them. But I just don't understand what the right side is telling me. And I think this topic does need a few sentences of a description to make people understand what's going on.
Absolutely. I think the very framing of it it's more like jargon that would be used in the sector. And this sector about reproductive rights and family planning and it's a pretty, developed, sector of international development, and they have their own like language. And I think some of the way this is structured is on that language, and that language, like all jargon, is not always accessible to the broader public. And I think that, even, I've been working in this field for a long time, and I find it a little bit confusing. So I think you have to anticipate the questions that your users are going to have, that you yourself had when you were looking at the data, and give very brief answers to anticipate those questions that people are going to have.
Definitely. And I think some of it might be just uncertainty of how to talk about it. So it's easy to take maybe the original messaging or some, kind of copy and paste a bit from existing reports if people don't know how to express it in plain English because they might not fully understand it. But to the best of your abilities, rephrase it in a way that is plain and simple, that anyone can understand, any layperson new to this topic of, sexual and reproductive health and rights. Okay. So
I'm just looking at some of the comments and thinking, just wondering, and if people want to comment and give feedback on this, when we put these Viz5 data sets out, we try to really make comprehensive guides to get to help you understand the data, but there's always more color that comes out, right? Would it be helpful for people if we held like kind of an office hours or like an hour discussion or just open questions where you could pose questions and we could answer them? We could answer them to the best of our knowledge to help round it out. I'm just seeing people say, as we're doing the Viz review, well after all the work has been done, people are getting better context. That's kind of what I'm seeing from it. So if people have thoughts about that or think that would be helpful, I see Helen's on the chat too, please let us know. I think we'd be happy to help share as much context as possible, before you start working or in the early stages of your work. It might make your work, stronger and certainly would have more impact.
It's a great suggestion, and it's definitely something we can plan for next time. So if people can just in the live chat give a bit of a comment of how useful would it be, and I'm going to just suggest a format, and that's something like this. So it could be a YouTube live where people come. So maybe we do it on a Monday evening our time, so that we publish the data early on a Sunday, and people just take the first little bit of time just to look at the data and to look at the topic and see if they understand it, write down their questions, and then come to the live session with their questions ready to go. We will answer as many as we can. Maybe we even give a form for submitting them or ask on Twitter, and people can submit their questions, we collect them. And then people can go into visualizing the data.
That'd be great. And I can't promise that we would be able to answer all the questions, but at least, our team being there to tell what we do know would help accelerate your understanding. As a community of volunteers here, we could at least kind of transfer, mind map whatever we know, and that'll help you start from a better point in your research. And then, of course, if we do it on YouTube Live, then people can revisit it at their leisure. I think that'd be cool.
And if we can't make a live thing happen for whatever reason, we could always put the call for questions, and we just record a video of us responding to the questions. At least that is another option. Okay, so seems to be that a lot of people are in favor, so that's great. Now let's have a look at this Viz by. Let me just quickly scroll down. Avinash. Okay. So this is obviously very different from the others. It's a small multiples chart, and it has the countries in alphabetical order. No, it has them in the order of this ratio. And here, this is where I'm a bit torn, because on the one hand, I think it's great to include how to read this chart because it's not intuitive. On the other hand, I think if you have to tell people how to read the chart, is it effective in communicating what you want to tell them? But I also acknowledge that Avinash probably wanted to just experiment with this kind of chart. So what we're looking at is women who want to avoid pregnancy. That's the gray ones. I think it's the gray ones. Yeah. And then women who don't want to avoid pregnancy, I think it's the blue ones. So let me just double check. Okay.
Yeah, the ones who want to avoid. Oh, hang on.
I would maybe even reword it. I mean, I hope this is correct, but if you want to avoid pregnancy, basically, yeah, you want to avoid pregnancy. But if you don't want to avoid, which is a double negative, maybe it just says women who are happy to get pregnant or something like that. Just it's a bit easier on the brain.
I think there's a mistake on I think the how to read the chart is different from the chart. So the gray part is in the how to read the chart says women who do not want to avoid pregnancy. And then in the chart, the gray is women who want to avoid pregnancy.
Well, I think so in the how to read the chart, the arrow points to the words.
Oh, right. Okay.
I thought it was confusing.
I thought it was it's the blue that, okay. So, okay. I get it.
I would remove the arrows, put the text right next to the bubble, and color the text in the color of the bubble.
Absolutely right.
I think that would be easier.
Great advice, because I actually think this is one of the cooler ones. Okay. So you get a quick guide on like who, because this is the deal, right? Like some places it is like, sadly but true, like a woman's value in her community is her ability to produce, as many children as possible. And so a lot of women, particularly in really poor places, they don't really want to limit their pregnancy. Now, as women, as their economic sort of prospects develop, families want to space out their pregnancies. And this is what the big movement for family planning, it makes like families' lives better. So as people get, better at that, they start to want to do that more. They want to avoid pregnancy. And then the big question is, do they have the ability to, they have access to, right? And then you have these like other places where there's like fundamental limits on childbirth, where they all want to avoid pregnancy because it's against the law to have more than one, for example, or there's just different things here. So what I like about this is that you have a quick view in the overall picture, and then if you hover over, the tooltip does break out that population, right? The not applicable, which is a very jargony word focused on access, becomes these are the women who don't want to avoid pregnancy. Like they don't want to have this stuff, right? So they're not applicable because they don't want it. But then of the ones who do want to avoid it, here are the access points that they have, right? They're either not using it, they're using modern methods, which is, what the goal of the movement is trying to do, give access to modern methods, or they're not using anything, or they're using traditional. And these are ones who really want to avoid pregnancy. So that delta within that population is what's really relevant, right? Those are the ones who want it and don't have access to it. So I think what's cool about this is that it lets us, on a macro view, kind of see where the desire is for this, and then you can kind of zoom in and see, how's that access for desire.
Yeah. Now, I really like the points you made. The one thing I would say about that tooltip, the Vision tooltips, is I hover, I see, there's a Vision tooltips coming, and then I'm like, it's a table. I wonder if that can be displayed in a different way, because the Viz itself it looks so cool with these like handlebars or balloons or whatever you want to call them. But then the Vision tooltips is so different because it's just a table, and I would consider that. And in terms of the sort order, maybe sorting them by alphabet, because if someone is looking for a specific country, it's almost impossible to find because they don't know where they are on that spectrum. And I think when you have them sorted in descending order or ascending order for the different options, they all start looking so similar. Whereas if they're sorted alphabetically, you would actually see, there's a really small one, or there's a really big one, because they're not just progressing from big to small or small to big, just as a suggestion.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. The other thing I would say is on the left sidebar, put some padding in, because it's just banged up against the edge of
crowded.
It looks really crowded, and have some font consistency, because it's kind of all over the map between sans serif and serif.
Yeah. And I think it needs a bigger, impactful title, because it all gets a bit lost. So I would make the title nice and punchy. And contraceptive needs of women are still being unmet. Well, they're not being unmet, they're still unmet, but I think you can turn that into a really big statement. The needs of women when it comes to contraception are not met, or, something a bit more exciting, but just a bigger title, so we know immediately what this is about. Okay, time to move on. There's what looks like a simple map, I think. Next, probably need to zoom in. Okay. Okay, so this is, where's the end? Here we go. So this is there's a tree map. And in the text just above the tree map, it talks about unmet needs, but then the biggest box is not looking to avoid pregnancy. So they actually don't need contraception because they're happy to get pregnant. So why are we giving them so much space, or, that population so much space in the Viz?
Yeah, and key real estate at that.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. I think that's a wasted opportunity. But also, if you're going to do something so simple, I think styling is super important. And I think having microscopic names on these giant boxes is not helpful. It just, there's a lot of, whenever you have like super small font, you're just making your viewer really work. And people, I think you need to make it as easy as possible for the viewer to learn from what they're looking at. And if you make them work too hard, people give up. They just won't do it.
Yeah, and if people look at the website for Obfistula, I mean, it hits you in bold, big letters because they want you to just get the point straight away. And I think that's a great example of, like really hit the audience, especially when it's an impact topic. If we're talking about digital companies in Scotland, might not change the world, but this actually could. This could change someone's perception. It could make a difference. It could lead someone to donating money or whatever it is. So yeah, don't make people work too hard for understanding the viz, because if I zoom out to 100%, the font is so small and I have a big screen here that it's really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, like, I think this is a common theme. Think about your audience. Like, who are you talking to here? Like, who are you trying to send a message to specifically? And then whatever that audience is, like, how are you going to tell them the story in a compelling way that changes their, that teaches them something, that gives them something. You do this work to give people the gift of a better understanding. And you have to wrap it in a nice package so they're really excited to open it.
Yeah, I think people underestimate how big an opportunity they have as data visualization designers to actually get something out there into the world. So yeah, use that. The next one is by Gaffa, and I'm pretty sure he is online. So let's have a look at his viz. Sexual and reproductive health and rights. And it's a long form, and I'm curious because I think I know what you're going to say, but curious to hear your first impression on the design and the overall viz.
Oh, I like this one. No, I like the thing I really like is the drop down.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Drop down in Africa, and the thing that, to me, the story that this tells is that things are good. Things are good because, and I don't know if that's the full story, but like, 21.1% of people have unmet need, right? Which to me means 80 whatever 9 or 79% have met need. And I don't think that's the full story, but I think that's kind of that's what the high level story here is for me.
Yeah.
And I do. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, with regard to those numbers, I mean, strictly speaking, they are, of course, correct. That's out of the total population. But it's probably worth breaking it down to the ones who want to avoid pregnancy. So that half of the population or more that doesn't want to get pregnant, how many of those don't have their needs met? And, using a table calculation to break it down to that. So remove the ones who want to get pregnant and say, out of the ones who don't, how many actually have their needs met versus not met, because then the numbers are a lot higher.
That's right. And then the story, that's the true story, right? If women don't want this, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the ones who don't want it but can't get it. Or sorry, the ones who do want it but can't get it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's I like the font, I like the colors. Mm-hmm. It looks really pretty. And it's also, not overwhelming. But in terms of like trying to throw too much at you, but I think that the story that it tells is like everything's good, and I don't think for the women who really need this and don't get it, I don't think that's a good story. I think lives are really destroyed.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think this is a great base to start from, and it's just a few tweaks in the analysis because I think this overall story is still, he's talking about the unmet need, and it's just about adjusting those numbers to reflect out of the ones who want to avoid pregnancy. Now with the scatter plot, be careful because this one here tells a somewhat misleading story because one axis goes to 35, the other to 70%. So yes, it makes a square, but if they were both at 70%, the curve would look very different. And if you have a scatter plot, what does it actually tell us? Like are there as many whose needs are met versus needs are not met? Or what's the story in here? Because I see a title and I see the access labels, but there's no explanation that actually brings this together. And I think you don't really need the scatter plot. I think the top is fine to stand on its own and maybe have a bit of a conclusion there as well.
Yeah, or as I don't know if this would work at all, like visually, because there's a lot of things on the scatter plot. But if you size the dots by like the percentage of the population that this is referring to, so like if the not applicable versus applicable, like just the people who want it, like the people who want it and can get it or don't get it, like that, I think that would be a really interesting thing. Because that's what I look at is you look at China and there's just like one child policy. So probably maybe people don't even want it, but I think everything being, kept on the same scale, it misses the bigger picture of there's this population. And I think this is the big criticism of this viz is that it misses this factor of like, there are people who really need this and want it. Yeah. And we don't know how many of those people are there. And by looking at the overall population, you reduce the actual you reduce by looking at the met need or unmet need in the percentage of the overall population rather than just the women who want this. I think it undertells the story.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. But knowing Gafar, I know that he's gonna be creative in addressing our comments, so we'll let him do that. And next up, we have a very simple stacked bar chart from Seamus Deegan. And let's see what he's created. And I'm loving all the interactions on the chat, so keep up the great work. Cuban women should probably be Cuban women, not woman, have the highest rate of modern contraception methods usage in Latin America. Quite a mouthful to say out loud. I guess my first question is, why are we talking about Cuba? And it's fine to talk about Cuba, but it surprises me a bit because it's a country you tend to not hear much about. So maybe I would first talk about the topic and then bring in Cuba in a subtitle or something. What do you think, Seth?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the title, I think you got to simplify, you got to say, because this is about Latin America, right? This is about Latin America and the Caribbean. And I think having so many words in the title, again, you're asking too much of people. People just skip through it and they'll go to the colors and the shapes. So you got to make it simpler and let people sort of understand what your story is. Just like any story, like the first page or the first paragraph, even the first sentence, it determines if somebody's going to read the next.
Yeah.
And if you start with something really convoluted or confusing or just dense, like it doesn't convey a lot to you. There's just a lot of stuff you have to look at and you don't really see what it is. I think you don't start the introduction to your story very well.
Yeah. I agree. And then again, this is where I would make the suggestion to remove the ones that are not trying to prevent pregnancy, because if it's about contraception, they're not going to use it. So telling that story about, okay, who is using contraception and who maybe doesn't have access to contraception, because that's kind of the key thing. I mean, maybe this is meant to be a positive spin on it, but is it really 70% of women in Cuba? I mean, maybe it is, but what about Bolivia? What about the 22% of women who are using it? How many are trying to use it and don't have access? So that's what I'd be curious about.
Yeah, absolutely. If you took away that, how does it compare to Cuba?
Yeah. Okay. Trying to move quickly. Next is Ashley. And she has quite a few colors on there, and that's why I wanted to pick this one out. So we're looking at Africa, and this is truly focused on Africa, so that's great. Where are women's contraceptive needs, not contraceptive needs, not met?
Yeah, that's pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
The and I actually I like this. I did. Because it gave you a quick idea of of where the percentages were, right?
Yeah.
So you have the met need versus unmet need. And I think this is generally good. It lets you kind of move through and look at the different regions. I like how the map changes.
What I'm confused about though is this bar chart. What's the bit on the left? Why? So if we're talking about unmet need, remove the met need because that's just gonna be confusing, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you can simplify. You can really simplify it because you're really talking about like, where are they not being met, right? Also, if they're not being met, you still lose the scale of, how many of those women want it, right? Because think if you had like 99% of women who didn't want it and 1% of women who did, and then of that 1%, you had some really extreme position, it would tell a completely different story about that country. If you don't have the scale of who wants it and who doesn't, I think it misses. And I don't know how you would incorporate that here, but I think if you don't, there's like, I don't even know how to really describe this, but there's like different axes of data here that you have to choose which, are you going to go X, Y? Are you going to go X? Or are you going to go X, Y, Z, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to try to tell a story that has all the dimensions, you have to have somehow all those dimensions there. So if you're going to say where are our contraceptive needs not met, that's an XYZ, statement, right? You need to talk about who wants it, who gets it, and what do they get?
Yeah.
So I think if you kind of like map it out in your mind and say what dimensionality am I stating in my story and what needs to be present, then you can decide if you need that scale, that what scale of women are actually being included here.
Yeah, no, agreed. Now, Seth, how are you for time? Because YouTube doesn't actually cut us off.
I'm good. I'm good. It's 6:30. It's raining here. My kids are watching TV, some cartoons or something. So I'm
we're
good.
Yeah. Okay. Okie dokie. I mean, we don't have to go too far over time, but we have a bit of a buffer.
I love this. And
hopefully we've got everyone from Bride Talk. I did put the webinar up there. I did have the cover slide to say, please come to YouTube. So hopefully everyone made it over. Okay, so, I forgot who made this one. Ashik. Okay. So this one has the shadow boxes, I'll call them. But this time they work because they're more consistent and they really pop out and they're not overused across the whole viz. It's just in the title. Yeah.
And thank you for the branding there. I really appreciate you giving us a logo shout out up high in the headline. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, the colors here I really like because I think the purple and the green work really well with the gray, and it's more of an in-depth story by first glance. There's quite a bit of text, but I think it's well created. If I just look at the design, top to bottom, there's cool stuff going on. So again, making sure there's no typos. So percentage of women who want to avoid pregnancy should be lowercase.
That's also a percentage of women who wants. That's an object for disagreement. So percentage of women who want.
Yeah. And I actually, I have to admit, I don't have the numbers in my head now, but I don't know if you can aggregate them at this level, whether there was a country level aggregation, because in every country you might have a different sample size in the survey. So just be careful with that and double check whether you've, done the right calculations there.
Absolutely.
I like the subtitle or this little explanation at the top. The viz shows the challenges faced by women and girls in low and lower middle income countries in accessing contraception, sexual and reproductive health services across 4 different continents. Namely, I mean, that's cool, right? I understand what we're talking about here. I think that's a really well crafted subtitle.
Absolutely. And remember, guys, sometimes, the most intelligent explanation is the simplest and it's the hardest to get to.
Yeah.
So you have to have crystal clear understanding to be able to explain it crystally clear. And so sometimes when you throw a lot of verbiage and jargon, it even if you really know, and that's like how you know, it makes it seem like you may not understand it well enough to explain it to a fifth grader. Which is kind of how I see the world. So I think I got stuck in fifth grade. So I have to be able to, it has to be simple to me or I don't even get it.
And I actually think, and again, I don't have the numbers in my head, but this looks like percentage of unmet contraceptive needs. So this looks like Ashik, I think, Ashik has taken into account, okay, out of the women who don't want to get pregnant, how many have an unmet need? Because these numbers are higher than what we've previously seen. So there's South Sudan, of all women who want to avoid pregnancy, and then there should be a comma, over 85.7% of women do not use any methods, and 6.8% use traditional, only 7%, Okay. But then the second sentence I don't understand. Whereas in China, 93% of women's needs have been met. That doesn't seem to be connected to the previous one, but it's good to see that broken down hierarchy of, out of the ones who want to avoid it, how many have their needs met versus not met. And then it includes the methods, traditional and modern methods, which is great because people have heard of certain methods, but they might not be aware that, what includes what is a traditional method. And I think showing that or explaining that helps people understand the risks involved of still getting pregnant despite trying to avoid it.
Absolutely.
So I think we don't really have time to go through all the detail of the text, so can't really cross-check that right now. But overall, I think this is really well done.
Yeah, I like the barcode. It reminds me of, I'm playing with it. It's fun.
Absolutely. That's cool. Okay, so...
Just before you go, just one comment on these two bar charts at the top. Mm-hmm. I know you're ordering them by by sort of descending, but I think it'd be better if you just match the region with the region so you can see directly across. Like, because that's what I'm like looking at Latin America, who doesn't want to be pregnant, and then how many of them, what percentage is unmet. But then it's Oceania. I think it would be better if you just match them up.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. We still have such a long list to go through. We won't manage them all, but let's look at this filter style viz or funnel viz, because that might be doing what we suggested. Yes. So I'm going to skip all the text. It's too much text that's not formatted. I'm never going to read all of that just because of how it's formatted. I think that needs a bit of work. But if we look below for those funnels, so Africa, total population is 100%. How many want to avoid pregnancy? That's 44% in that survey. And then the unmet need, is that 21% of the total population or 21% of the 44%? That's what I'm curious about.
Oh, I think it's the total, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I would think it's a total because it's the funnel,
Yeah, and that's the missed opportunity, because I think if, like here, you would need to describe it a bit, but if you could say how many of the 44% have the unmet need, because that's really the crux of it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay. And then let's jump to the next one. Oh yeah, so Pavan's viz, and I know that he is watching live. My first impression was it's stunning. The second impression was I can't read it without zooming in. So let's go to 100% just for the sake of demonstration. This is really small text, and I love the fact that I think the design overall really beautiful. There's great amount of space in between, but the text is just too small. And even if I put on my glasses, it's not really gonna get much larger. I don't have the poorest eyesight, but it's just it looks like it's font size 8 to me, and I think nothing should ever be under 11 if there's lots of text that people should read.
Yeah, definitely.
What's your thoughts on the charts themselves?
No, I agree. I think it's really pretty, and I like stylistically. I think it looks good. Like, it looks good. I like the contrast with the dark background of the scatter plots and the different sizes here. I think the look and feel of it's great. And I actually think, from a distance, the little font looks nice. I just don't think anybody will read it because it's too makes you squint, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
What I also think is cool about this is the GDP, because I was I was hoping somebody would look at this, because it does track, you know, like the economic sort of advancement with the desire for family planning and the use of it. So I think that's a good angle as well.
Yes, and I've seen a few people include a call to action. I've just clicked on the one that Pavan included, which goes to the Guttmacher Institute, which is great. If I click on that, it takes me to the report. The report has 97 pages. I am probably not going to read it. I would suggest, because, you know, your viz is basically your first impression, to instead include a call to action such as donate, because that's a much faster progress, and people might actually be you know, emotionally touched enough to be like, yeah, I'm actually, I want to support this. So, well, and whether it's donate or learn something more, but that's a bit easier to digest than a 97-page report, and including that in your call to action could be a great way to get people engaged and to really have an impact straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, please, guys, please, branding, Biz5 and or Operation Fistula, we really, really would appreciate it, especially because some of you are going to get a lot of exposure. And I do know that congratulations to Biz of the Day. We did get a Biz of the Day, another one out of the Biz5 effort this week, but there's no message or branding about anything for Biz5. So no one's going to know about the project. They're not going to know that it's attached to the project. So guys, please do your best to put something about Biz5, something about Operation Fistula, but really Biz5. We want more and more people to know about this effort, and we really want to bring more people into the process here. And when you do something brilliant and Tableau recognizes it, it's a great opportunity for us to bring more people into this effort. So please, whenever you can, whenever it fits stylistically, please include some branding or some link to this effort that we're doing.
Absolutely. And maybe next time I can work with Helen again to include some branding in terms of logos that people are allowed to use on their vizzes for this, like a simple Viz5 one, but also feel free to work it into your design. So maybe Pavan can do, some nice white font, but just a simple hashtag Viz5 and a button that says, you like this viz, so if you want to build your own and participate in this initiative, click here, and it takes them to the data set or the Operation Fistula Viz5 page, and people can actually do their own participation as well.
Yeah, that's great. We you know what, our team is going to help get some collateral like this that you guys can easily integrate, so you don't have to create stuff, and then we have brand consistency. And then we'll just ask everybody to find a way. It'll be a design challenge. Find a way, and we'll give you. We won't be so draconian. We'll give you some different ways to play with it. Some PDF, some transparent PDFs that you can put in.
Absolutely. I'm just opening up the next one, and people are saying on the chat that they would love some transparent logos that they can use. So we'll make sure that we pay attention to that. Okay, I'm just going to zoom in rather than full screen. So another long form viz, and I'm slightly confused by the font because further below I've got something like a Times New Roman, but at the top I've got Comic Sans, and I know that there's a lot of people who are proponents of Comic Sans for people who have dyslexia because it's easier to read. But to me, admittedly, Comic Sans is still like a kid's birthday invitation kind of font. I find it, I've seen invoices in Comic Sans, and they just, it just doesn't work for me for a serious topic.
I hear you, and I could generally probably agree. I do think you could pull it off. I think the thing that to me is really troubling is the change from all caps to small font. It is really distracting, So I think it might be easier to do if you just kept the title all in title case or in all caps with this font instead of switching mid title. I think that's a problem. That's highly distracting for somebody who's simple like me.
So here we've got a lot of space taken up by this world map, And it doesn't seem to really add to my understanding, because the countries themselves are quite small because all of them are included. So also the colors, they're very dark and kind of different from one another. I would suggest another, simple color range from light to dark. And if you want to stick to monochrome, maybe make it light gray to dark gray or black. And not making the color legend that wide, because it takes a lot of focus away from the text and the viz, because it's a really big block of color. That would be my first impression there. Now I think we can skip the scatter plot because we've talked about that.
But can I just give one positive comment? Like unfulfilled contraceptive needs. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
I like that. Unfulfilled, like that's who wants it and doesn't get it, right?
Definitely.
I like it.
And then what confuses me, so at the top we have the color, and it's blue, dark purple, and black for the level of needs being met. But further down we have like a blue grayish. They're kind of similar colors, but now they suddenly mean continents. So I'd just be careful about making it consistent. And then further down again, we have different colors, again having a different meaning. So make sure that your color has the same meaning throughout the viz, or there isn't really a meaning attached. It's more just a design feature, but it's clearly, it's clear that it is just a design feature. And the dot plots don't really do it for me, because it's really hard to get information out of them. All I see is there are a lot of countries where women want to avoid getting pregnant, or they don't want to avoid getting pregnant. And the dark blue in the text is pretty much not distinguishable from the black. So it's kind of impossible to understand what the dark blue means.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just conscious of time and wanting to move on to get a couple more vizzes covered. The next one, I think, again, it has some unique elements that we haven't covered so far, including a picture. So I thought we'll jump to that, by Yash Sakuya. And let me make that a bit bigger. So, contraception use worldwide, sexual and reproductive health rights. What do you think of the title?
I think it's. I'm a little distracted by the change in font size. Why is it set up like this? And also the high left justification with no padding.
Yeah.
I get a little caught up with that. Also, this is a complete nerd in the sector, but contraception use, I don't know. And I may even not be wrong, but I would say contraceptive use,
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's style or language or what, but mostly it's the size of contraception versus the rest of it, and the left justification against the line that I don't like.
Yeah. Now, then the viz says, know your data. And my first thing is, I get defensive. Someone is suggesting I maybe don't know my data. That's kind of my first impression here. So don't put your audience on the defense, because they might just kind of switch off and navigate to somewhere else. The data set studies the challenges faced by women and girls. Okay. But that doesn't... Okay, so the map shows that comes kind of after the map. So I would suggest to put that above the map, so that I'm not like, okay, I'm looking at a map, I don't know what it is, then I have to read about what the map is. And percentage is spelled incorrectly, and unmet need should be lowercase, and contraception should be lowercase, and women should be lowercase. So just being, very mindful of spelling. The font is also different from the one used above. There's a lot of mixing up going on.
Just remember, with real estate too, like the know your data is in a prime spot. Mm-hmm. And it's an imperative thing that could just, bother somebody. But it also doesn't really add any value at all. What is it doing? How does saying know your data, help me understand the topic? It just doesn't do anything, right? So, stylistically, you might have a device to do something to make a viewer feel something. Like even, using annoyance can be an effective method. But to what end is this? What are you're telling me know your data, but where's the value contribution for what you're trying to get from your audience with this,
Okay. And then the text further down, there's a lot of bold, large numbers, colors, like it's all over the place, and I don't know what to focus on, and I'm very reluctant to read it because I'm like, it's kind of screaming at me, but it's not telling me anything. So I see there's 2 buttons at the bottom. There's a link to the Guttmacher Institute report, and there's a country-wise analysis. I'm going to click on that because that's now actually the viz, and you're hiding it. Don't hide the viz. Make your viz longer or wider. And then we have, wanting to avoid pregnancy versus not. For some reason, Uzbekistan is selected, so I'm just going to select Peru, just a different country to see how it changes. Out of 60, okay, so in this case for Peru, out of 60.2% of women who want to avoid pregnancy, and again, it should be all lowercase, the contraceptive needs of, that's too difficult. Just say 23.7% do not have access to or have their contraceptive needs not fulfilled. And maybe in Peru could be somewhere else, and you could have the country Peru, like have Peru as a big title so we all know what we're looking at. Because I think the analysis is there. It's just kind of hidden behind clunky wording and unclear descriptions.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like with this, because you're subdividing, right? Like the Peru thing, of the 60.2%, I would almost color that the same color as the pie piece above, so I know, so I have a connection to it. When you say out of that population, then the 23.7, I don't think makes sense, because I think that's 23.7 on the whole population, isn't it?
I think the number should be higher, because if we have 23.7 unmet, 36.6 met need, what's the other ones? So it should be a higher number. And the need met, we don't even need, because we can say, well, out of the ones who want to avoid it, there's only met need or unmet need. There is no really other option.
And you should color those. First, I think there probably is a better thing than bars for this. But I think if you're going to use something like this, where you're comparing 2 components of a subset, you should color the subset in the family of that subset, right?
Like a lighter blue or something.
You have that like green thing that's like the one who want to avoid pregnancy, and that's the population. That's the 60.2% that you're talking about. And that population splits up between, the unmet need and met need. And I think instead of having it be dark gray, that met need is associated with people who don't want to avoid pregnancy, and that's not accurate. So the visual connotation is incorrect. So I think you need to make them shades of that same green color that's the first part of your pie. Definitely. And I think and also I would match the pie colors to your image there, because otherwise it just seems like it clashes, Like you're going to use that picture, I would use, or that JPEG or whatever it is, I would make my color scheme fit with that color.
Definitely. Now, I think there's a few things here to unpack still, but in the interest of time, we'll move on. Just in the last thing, it's Operation Fistula, not Fistula. So make sure that you correct your typos. Like it's at the point where I think, it just gets a bit lazy, and I know people don't do these intentionally, but as a data professional, this is like bread and butter. Those are things that we shouldn't even have to comment on. I'm gonna just quickly scroll up and see if there's one last one that's is there any that stood out to you, Seth, that you would like to look at if we pick one last viz?
We should no, I'll let you pick. There's so many good ones.
There are a lot. There's one that I actually so Al Kabash Isaac I noticed the map, and I noticed there's a big hole where Congo is, but maybe, because Congo, I don't know if that's, because it's listed in the bars, but then there's a giant hole in the map, and I don't understand it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't either.
So maybe something to look at for Isaac. And women's contraceptive needs in Africa, only 11.6% of women's contraceptive needs are met. Where does the 11.6 come from? Was that maybe in the, I don't know if that was in the article. But so if that number is correct, I'm not going to check it now, but if only 11.6% of women's needs are met, why not say, here's my math, 88.4% of women don't have their contraceptive needs met. I think that's like a much more impactful number than looking at the small one that hasn't, that it just, I think you can make a bigger impact with a bigger number.
Why don't we, to close this, why don't we have a celebratory glance at the Viz that won Viz of the Day?
Okay, let me find that Viz of the Day.
It's from Zifa.
Yes.
Zifa, am I saying your name right? Zifa, if you're in the chat.
And she is actually also online, so I just need to find it on the Twitter. It's bloody.
Oh, sure, I have it. Can I? Let me chat it to you.
Yeah, because it's all about the verse of the day from the Bible.
Here we go.
Oh.
Okay, there you go. I just sent it to you on the Zoom.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, it's so pretty. It really is.
All right. Let me put it into full screen just for the full impact. Oh, I wish the background would also turn the same color. Okay.
Oh, me too. They should put that feature in.
Yeah. Let's demand it. Let's start a Twitter.
Are people asking? Yeah. People let's do it.
A look at women's lack of access to modern contraceptives in low and lower middle income countries. Okay. It's like, this is the kind of Iron Viz level stuff that we see sometimes, and it's really cool. I do want to make clear, we don't expect such elaborate design in people's weekly visualizations. If you do it, amazing. If you don't, perfectly fine.
And if you do it amazingly like this, put some branding in it for us, please.
So 218 million women, which is 24% out of about who want to avoid pregnancy, have an unmet need for modern contraception.
Oh, I just see a little typo. Low and middle income, LMIC in the title there. You want to change that?
Yes, LMIC.
In the subtitle, just under unmet needs.
Yeah.
Zifa, you want to change that to LMCIs. Okay. Low and income countries.
I love okay, let me hover over this question mark. Data dictionary, met need, women who want to avoid pregnancy that are using modern methods. Unmet need, women who want to avoid pregnancy that are using either no methods or traditional methods. Okay. So I love that there's an explanation and that people can really understand where the data is from, what this is about. Then we have unmet contraceptive needs across continents vary.
So, but hey, just first with this little question mark to give explanation. I love this as a technique. I love it because so often the Viz gets completely bogged down with all this like overhead that some people may not want or need. So you let me choose. Let me choose if I want to dig into it. I love that. I love that as a design device, and I'm going to start doing that more in my stuff. And I thank you. That's really cool.
Yes, and I would suggest to maybe just have some more line breaks so the box becomes narrower, so it's not covering so much of the beautiful Viz. Now, jumping to this dot plot, we have the different continents, and this is where Zifa could use a technique from, who was it? Pavan? No, it was someone else who did the drop down, because then you could expand and contract maybe from the different kind of sub-regions. Okay, so China has the lowest unmet need. Do we...
I do actually rather than have that accordion kind of thing that you were just saying, I actually do like that I can look at Africa and I can look regionally if there's any differences,
Yeah.
all at once. So I can see the continent, and then I can also look at the continent compared to the other sort of continental groupings to see how they might, and if there's, if there's subgroups within it. I think this breakdown of a scatter plot and the sort of just the way it's segmented, it is very easy to do some quick visual analysis and see stories that emerge from that.
Yeah.
And I think that as a device, we've seen a lot of scatter plots, and I think that's one of the things that is really strong about this is that it gives me like very specific stories in regions, but it also gives me the stories within a region of the different parts of that region, and then it lets me have a region by region comparison, all in one laptop screen view. Like that's excellent. That's a really good work.
And I like that she has called out 2 countries, China and Trinidad and Tobago, but then at the further down also breaks them down into, why is it? I mean, there's only so much information that we can get from the report and the data, but based on that information, putting together a chart that just talks about it. So I would say, though, that the why is answered in the text, not really in the viz, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. No, but I think that's okay because we're talking about extremes.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is like not applicable is, I know that was in the data, but those are women who are not seeking it,
Yeah.
So I don't know. So I would almost move it. Mm-hmm. I would almost move it to the bottom of the list, and maybe even change the the wording of it. I know that's what was in the data, but I think this is it's just really good explanation. I mean, like, it's totally one-child policy is a huge reason why that exists the way it is, and that's great context, and I think being able to explain these extremes, it gives people context that can help fill in the blanks. You hit a viz, you can't do everything. You really can't do everything. But what you can do is tell a story and let people explore the stories within that story. And I think what's great about this is that it very elegantly lays out a very high level story, but it lets people kind of see within that arc other arcs. And I think and I really Zifa, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I'm sorry if I'm not, but it's really great work. Really great work.
Definitely. And I think she's already commented that, branding. And so 2 things I would include is a reference to Viz 5 and Obfistula, and a call to action for people to make a difference with a donate button or something like that. I think that would really round it off at the bottom as well. Because people, if they take all that time to read through it, I think it's great to then hit them with a bit of reality.
And look at that. You already have 2,200 views. That's fantastic.
Yes. Yeah.
Really fantastic.
So congrats on the Viz of the day. Now I'm going to bring our faces back on the screen because we're going to say goodbye. So we've taken
Gosh, I look
more
like
time than planned.
Today. I didn't realize I've been looking at the screen, playing with my hair. I'm looking like a wild man over here.
No, looking very much like someone who just returned from vacation and is just relaxed and coming home. So yeah, thank you, Seth, for joining us once again, or joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to everyone for doing such great work. This has been, I gotta just say, I love the new format here. I love that we're using Zoom and YouTube, and it's so cool to see all the comments coming in. I really like this, and so for the next one we're going to try to have like an office hours. Somehow Eva, you and I and Helen will all figure out how to do this. And we really love your engagement, your questions, your comments, just like we really feel, grateful for having the opportunity to give our feedback to you. So thank you, Eva, for making all this possible. And thank you to the community for all of your great, your fantastic work. It's really brilliant to see the different perspectives on this really important topic, and we're really excited for the next one.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. So that's going to be in about 4 weeks' time, and everyone can get ready for that. So with that, we'll close it out here. Everyone, great work. We'll look forward to seeing your updates so that we can compile the favorites for the week, and maybe a couple of lessons learned. I'll do a video on that. And yeah, I think that brings us to the end. And thank you again, Seth and Helen, also for tirelessly answering questions on the chat and engaging with people.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Great work.
See everyone on Twitter.
All right, guys, take it easy.
Okay, bye.
Bye.